Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. And what a great episode we're going to have today because we're throwing away the usual script. And today we're going to be talking all about the Australian Lure, Fly and Outdoors Expo, which is just around the corner. And it's 30th of July at the Fernvale Showgrounds, not far away. By the time this episode comes out, folks, you'd better have your skates on and be ready to go down and check out the Lure, Fly and Outdoors Expo. And to talk about the expo today, we've got the man who was behind it right from the very start. We've got Gary Fitz. So Gary, welcome back, mate. You've been on the show before. Great to have you here again.
Yeah, always a pleasure jumping on. It's I love listening to the show as well whenever I get the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, mate. I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you do with the Lure and Fly Expo as well. And now outdoors as well. I keep forgetting the outdoors bit, mate. But you do some camping and boating and outdoorsy stuff with the show as well. So that's fantastic that it's expanded out to that too. So really appreciate that. But we've also got another guest here today. It's a three-way chat. We've got Joey Urquhart from Jollip Lures. So, Joey, welcome along, mate. Looking forward to a great chat with you as well.
Yeah, cheers, Greg. Thanks for having us, and thanks for the invite, Fitzy.
It is going to be a great chat. So, Fitz, maybe let's start by talking a little bit about the expo and how it kind of came about. Because, as I said, you were there right from the start. You've been a driving force all the way along. It's been going for quite a few years now, over a decade, I believe. How did it all begin?
Well, the idea was kicking around for years, and I know some mates that play cricket and football with. We're all keen lure anglers, and I know sitting around after cricket one night years ago after training all us lure fishers, was saying we should have a get together on like a swap meet or everyone look at each other's lures and check out what you got. And that idea kind of simmered away for a bit more, and then another couple of fishing clubs. The It was kicked around by a few of them boys as well. And then I sat down with Brad Holland, who recently passed away, and Broly, and just kicked some ideas around. And said, let's do it. What do you think we need to do to make this happen? So, as a lure maker, I run a pretty good show. So,
Yeah.
because I've had some experience in running fishing comps and things like that. So, but my lure making abilities were pretty limited. So, I good enough to catch a couple of fish, but they were pretty terrible as far as lures go. So, just thought, you know what, let's have a crack, let's throw it out there. And we started in the community hall of Fernvale, back where it is now, but it's grown into the indoor sports centre and the outdoor part of the event. And we filled it up. There's a few guys, Aussie made lures. We had a bit of a collections area, which was a really good thing to include. And we didn't know whether we get 50 people there or 200. And the first morning we said, well, let's try if you're going to do it, let's have a serious crack. Let's do it 2 days. First morning, I had my sister working on the gate, and she rang me from outside. She said, "There's 800 people here. What do you want me to do?" And I walked over and had a look on the hall, and it said maximum capacity 500 people. So I don't know what to do. Just let them in. Just go. And you couldn't move. You seriously couldn't move. I tried to move, get outside of the hall. It took me half an hour. Some kid passed out. I thought I'm going to get sued. We had the ambulance. Anyway, it all worked out, and it was just a magnificent kickoff. Just blew me away and blew everyone away that came. Some of the lure makers, but what was behind it is, I go back. I reckon Australia hit a peak in lure making in the mid 1980s, and there were so many lure makers that had fallen off the perch, just given up, sold out. The lures were now getting flocked out of China, and I think it was a dying art, and that's probably a big part of why I thought let's try and provide a platform for Aussie lure makers to show off their goods and to sell them, but it's not really about selling; it's about showing the world. And for tackle shops to come and source new products, and how do we bring that next generation of lure makers through? Let's inspire the next ones. And I know a lot of work that you do, Greg. You're inspiring those guys as well. So that's kind of where it started, and it evolved into the creature that it is now.
Well, it's a very large creature now and a very well-known creature. So congratulations on that. And look, I think it's amazing when you look at where the show's come from over the last 10 years. These days, anyone who's in lure making or lure fishing around Australia knows about the show. Not everyone can get to it every year, but
Yeah,
it's a wonderful opportunity to see, as you say, Australian-made lures. And we'll have a bit of a chat in a moment about what constitutes an Australian-made lure, because that's always a bit of a bed of hot potatoes, that one.
yeah,
But as you say, it's so easy to pick up lures in the bargain box at the front of the tackle shop that have been brought in from overseas, that have been made for 20 cents and sold for $5. And they're okay, but they're not really designed for Australian conditions and Australian species. But when you turn up at the Lure Expo, what will hit you is these are lures made by Australians for Australians and Australian fishing conditions, and there's something very special about that, mate.
yeah. I reckon there's a fair chunk of lure makers in Australia. I've spoken to a whole stack of them now over the last decade. I reckon some of them probably lose money on what they're doing, but the reason why they're making lures is some guys do it for their mental health. They need an outlet. They want an outlet. Some do it just for pride, and others do it as a business model to try and turn a few bucks. And I reckon a big turning point in lure making in Australia was Harry Watson and Jackals. Now, people might laugh at this, but until Jackals hit the market and they started cleaning up at bass points, no one was prepared to pay 30 something dollars for a lure. And Australian lure makers were trying to make a lure, produce it, package it, and get it out in a trade price so that it could sell in a tackle shop for 12, 14, no more than, was this barrier there of $15, $16. Not to pay more than that for a lure. And all of a sudden, Jackals come along and they're 30 something bucks. And everyone's going, holy cow, these things really work. Well, that blew that bubble. And it made it, I reckon it made it the, available for the Australian lure makers to actually charge an amount that what their lures are actually worth.
Yeah, yeah. And look, that's something I've been saying to people for years is, if you don't have some handmade custom lures in your box, and every Australian angler should have some timber lures in their box. There's nothing wrong with plastic lures, but everybody should have a few timber lures. But if you go to somewhere like the Lure Expo and you're expecting to pay 10, 12 bucks, you're insulting the lure maker, because seriously, the amount of work that goes into these things, not just in the construction of the lure, but in building up the skills and coming up with the design and prototyping and testing before you even get to the stage of producing them. There's so much work goes into that, and these guys are not making millions of bucks out of it, I can tell you, but they're doing it out of passion, out of love for what they do, and offer them a reasonable, reasonable amount for their lures. It's only fair. And I have to say, mate, this is a bit of a side story here, but I do have a mate who did quite well for a little while in the handmade lure industry, and his strategy was he put Japanese writing on all the packaging for his lures, because he figured people were prepared to pay for Japanese lures, and so he'd hand make them and put Japanese print on the packaging, and that was going to drive the price up. So it's a bit sad, I guess, that that's the way that things were back in the day. But I think we've come through that now, as you said, and it's very much now people appreciate the quality and the workmanship that goes into these things.
Yeah,
Mate,
absolutely.
let's have a talk about what's on offer at the Lure Expo. For those who perhaps haven't been before, or even for those who have, there might be some new things this year. But walk us through some of the attractions, some of the things we can expect to see when we turn up at Fernvale. And we want to be there at 9 o'clock, because it's a one-day show this year, from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock. And you want to spend some time there, talk to some people. So turn up at 9 o'clock. What are we going to find, mate, when the gates open?
Well, let's do the maths on that. There's 6 hours and there's 80 something exhibitors, and there's more brands than that, but there's 80 something stalls. So how many minutes do you get at each stand? So, and I mean, Joey's got a fair size. I think Joey's got one of the biggest stands there as an individual lure maker this year. So, but I won't.
Don't steal his thunder. We'll get to
I won't
Joey in
rain
a
on
minute.
his parade. Joey's going to tell you all about that pretty soon. So we've got all sorts of lure makers from all over Australia. Seriously, there's some are moulded lures. We've got hand carved timber lures. We've got some are done on copy lathes, but they're all finished. The paint jobs is just insanely good. We've got soft plastics, and I'll touch on this a little bit later with our awards as well. There's spinnerbaits, there's chatterbaits, there's surface lures. It's not just yellow belly and cod lures now. Like there's blue water stuff there. There's fly tying, there's fly casting. We've got the big Shimano stage tank there as well with live barra in it. We've got live native fish display. There's camp oven cooking with Campsite Chris, like using smokers and camp ovens and barbecues. There's just so much going on. I think Joey's got an announcement to make. Am I cracking that too soon, Joey?
No. We can drop that later on. That's all right.
Yeah, okay.
He's going to play coy for the
this.
moment. We'll come back to that.
Yep.
Yeah, don't let us
And,
forget.
Yep, and so there's also the collection. So it's going to be, I think this year's going to be more collections there than has ever been there in the past. So this is the old stuff. You know, I got some just here, just behind me. I can grab some. You know, I collect old Garra lures. I've got some here that are like 40 years old. I don't know how old Terry is, but I got some from when he was still playing footy, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So there's all sorts of stuff going on. And it's just getting better and better every year. The quality, the design, the finish, all that sort of stuff that goes into not just our timber lures, our molded lures, the soft plastics, all of that stuff is just getting better and better every year.
Yeah, and I mean, even things like, vibes and blades and and trolling lures, the whole lot. There's really just, you name it, any kind of lure you can see.
Weight baits, sticks, poppers, paddlers, anyway, jam anything in front of bait, and it's pretty much going to be covered there.
Any style of lure is
blades.
Yeah, any style of lure is acceptable, and as long as it's Australian made. So let's talk about that now, mate. I'm going to open that can of worms, that Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Tell us what constitutes an Australian made lure. What's allowed to be exhibited at the Australian Lure and Fly Expo?
How long's a piece of string? Look, I've had a couple of guys in the past come up and go, they're not Australian made, and I go, well, what part isn't? Maybe I'm not saying this is a case. It could be an example. Someone just gets bodies in from overseas and adds all the hardware here, the paint, the packaging, and it's under their brand. I mean, is that Australian? I don't know. Generally speaking, as long as a major part of it is the construction or putting that thing together is Australian made, well, I think that qualifies. I mean, is there any Australian made split rings? Is there any Australian made trebles? The Lexington bibs, I think that's all made overseas. The paints are certainly made overseas, I'd say. Omega clips, all figure eights, all that. I mean, wow.
It all becomes a bit. At the end of the day, it's really a moot point, isn't it? As long as it's not a pre-made lure body that you're just attaching a few hooks and rings to. If you're having some part of the actual manufacture or construction of it, then I guess it qualifies.
Like generally, most people get the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. And there's I'm not poo-pooing any American stuff or Japanese stuff. I've got a box here somewhere that's just full of Rapalas. But if there's a niche that's there, and I can fill that with an Aussie-made lure, I'm buying the Aussie-made every time.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I think one of the things is, we need to support our Australian businesses. So it's a great thing, whether somebody's importing parts and putting lures together and painting them up, or whether they're making them from scratch, as much as you can. As you say, most of the components still come from overseas. It doesn't really matter. You're still supporting an Australian business, and that's really important. But I think, Australia has a heritage, and you've played a big part in this, mate. You've played a very big part in this. We've got a heritage here of having some of the world's best lure makers. I think if you looked, per head of population, Australia's probably got more top lure makers than any other country in the world, right? In total numbers, perhaps the US has got the edge on us, but per head of population, I doubt that they can come anywhere near Australia.
That's because we've got such unique fish species, and our fishing, while we might whinge sometimes that the fishing's bad, it's pretty bloody good compared to other parts of the world. We're a bit spoiled, I think.
Absolutely. And look, when you think about it, if you look at some of the mass-produced lures on the market, and I don't want to run any of them down because, look, I use plenty of shop-bought lures from all sorts of different brands and all over the world. No problem whatsoever with that. But when you think about the money that goes into mass-producing a lure, you've got to make something that's going to be usable all over the world. So if you think about a mass-produced molded hard-bodied lure, if they're made for the American market, they're going to then ship them to Japan, they're going to ship them to Australia, they're going to ship them to New Zealand and South Africa and anywhere else that they think they can sell those lures. Now, they're not specifically designed for our conditions. They may work, but what you're looking at the Lure and Fly Expo is lures that are specifically designed for Australian species and Australian conditions by Australian anglers, right?
Yep. Learn, and some of those lessons are learned from father to son, like generational changes, and learn from mates. Maybe let's try something a little bit different with this one. Works better for that species in this scenario. You just don't get that out of a overseas lure. They're just constantly tweaking them, and that's where we haven't got on to having a chat with Joey yet, but I think guys like Joey epitomise the Australian lure manufacturing sector in that Joey hasn't been around for a million years. He's still he's a absolutely fantastic young man, but his quality in a short period of time of lures that actually catch fish, they swim, and the finish on them is up there. I'll hold Joey up to anyone in the world.
Yep, absolutely.
And there's plenty of guys out there like Joey now.
Yeah, it's tremendous. And I love that. And as I said, everybody should have some Australian-made, handmade timber lures in their box, some Australian handmade soft plastic lures as well. There's lots of different styles made here for our species by Australian anglers. So I'm going to switch over to Joey now. We're going to have a bit of a chat because, mate, I come from a bit of a lure making heritage myself. Never made lures to sell. Always just made them for my own guilty pleasure and for sharing with mates and that kind of thing, but loved it and spent a lot of time teaching people how to make lures. Tell me what making wooden lures means to you, because most of your lures are handmade timber lures, yeah?
Yeah, mate. Everything that I do here is timber. For me, it's just I get so much enjoyment out of it. To start with, it started as a bit of a hobby, as everyone does when they do this. They do it as a hobby, whether it's after work or the weekend or whatever, just to relax and unwind. But it sort of grew. Stores started ordering lures, and then it build, and next thing you know, you're doing it full time, and it's your job. But there's nothing better than getting a picture or a message from whether it's a 16-year-old kid or an 80-year-old man that's caught a cracking fish on one of your lures. There's literally nothing better. That's the exact reason why I do it. Look, the money's good sometimes, but if I can make someone's day and catch a cracking fish, well, that's my job done.
Yeah. And look, I can tell you one thing better, mate, and that's actually catching a fish on your own lure yourself. And, anytime you catch a cracker fish on one of your own homemade lures, there's just nothing beats that feeling. So, I'm encouraging everybody who's thinking about having a crack at lure making to get to the expo, talk to people like Joey, because it's not that hard to do. The equipment, the materials, all the components, much easier to get now than they were 10 years ago. And there's people out there that can help you, and we need more lure makers coming through the pipeline all the time. So definitely get involved in that. And I'm sure Joey would be only too happy to talk to you. So, Joey, tell us a little bit about your lures, mate. What styles of lures are you making?
So basically now we do everything. Basically, we have all bases covered. When we turn it into a business, the only way a business progresses is if you cover all bases. You can't run like Ford can't just sell a convertible. Like it's just not going to work. You've got to sell all styles of lures. So basically now we sell everything from brim, bass, barra, cod, you name it. We've got a lure there to catch it.
Awesome. And you've got a website, of course. So we will put some show notes together for this, but tell us where we can find your website, mate.
So my website's just www.jolliplures.com.
So it's Jollip?
Jollip, yep, lures. Or you just shoot us a message. We've got about 15 stores now Australia-wide that stock our products, and that is my preferred avenue for you to purchase your lures. My website's great, but normally I try and stock things on there that don't go into my stores, just not to have that clash. They support me and I want to support them and want that relationship to go for a long time. So I try and just keep it at point of difference. And if anyone wants lures, I try and push them towards my stores first.
Yeah, cool. Now, you said that you started out making lures as a bit of a hobby. I love that, and more people should do that. A lot of people start out wanting to make a business of it. And look, going back in the day when I was doing lots of, teaching around lure making, people would say to me, "Oh, I want to start making some lures so I can save a few bucks." And I'd say, "Yeah, great idea." And while you're at it, go and buy a boat so you can save a few bucks on fish as well, because you're going to get addicted to this and you're going to spend money on gear, and it's just going to become such a passion for you that the money you make won't be as important as what you're getting out of the spiritual and social stuff that you get out of it. So, wooden lures, mate. What do wooden lures mean to you? Why should we have wooden lures in our tackle box alongside those plastic ones that we buy in the off the shelves in the tackle shop?
I think first thing is growing up, my dad was pretty old school, how we used to fish for perch uh, off the bank. So it was all old school timber lures. Can't think of the name of one off the top of my head here, but it was made locally here in town, and they were cracking little lure. And over the years, my dad used to tell me, he'd say, like, timber's more natural. And after fishing with miles of different lures over the years, he's 100% right. Like, you can have a silent plastic Japanese lure, but it will not compare to a silent timber lure in the water. It's the way it lands, it's the action, it's everything about it. And the best thing about timber lures is not one are the same. Every single one is different.
Even if they're CNC routed or a copy lathe, there's variance in the timber. It doesn't matter that they're identical in shape and size and that sort of thing.
No.
There's just some natural variability in that timber that makes them everyone just a little bit different.
Yeah, you could run 100 bodies out in a CNC, and if you've got a timber background, you know that one piece of timber is totally different. You go along 100 mil in that stick of timber, and the density is going to be absolutely different. So that's why they're handmade timber lures at the end of the day. Whether they're CNC'd or not, they're still handmade timber
Yeah,
lures.
absolutely. And look, one of the things you'll find, you talk to anyone who's guiding for barramundi up north or any fishing guide fishing anywhere in Australia, really, you'll find they've usually got a few timber lures in their box, and they reserve them for the tough days. Just like the tournament anglers, they have those timber lures. They pull them out when things are tough. You're going to go to the timber lure because it's different to everything else. So if you're fishing a heavily pressured water, where the fish have heard every major lure brand, they've heard the rattles, they've seen the lures, they know those lures, they've been educated about them, and you start throwing timber lures at them, then it's something different sound signature, different vibration, different look, different feel. Everything about it's different, and your chances of getting a hookup increase dramatically. So, Joey, let's talk about where you're headed with your business and how the Lure and Fly Expo has helped you. How long have you been exhibiting at the Lure and Fly and Outdoors Expo?
I think our first expo was in 17. I think it was. It was when it was back at Ipswich. I think we did a couple of years there, and then we switched over to Beenleigh, and then sort of COVID come and buggered everything up.
Slowed it down a bit, yeah.
Yeah, but Fitzy threw together that one there last year, and I think the board opened about 6 days before the expo. So I lived in the shed for 6 days and got some lures together, and we headed off to the expo, which was fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, okay. So 2017, tell us why it is that you keep coming back, mate. And I'm really interested from a lure maker's perspective. I know there'll be a lot of lure makers out there. Maybe they're budding, business people that want to create a cottage business around their lure making. And they're saying, should I go to the expo or shouldn't I? What does the expo actually do for you? Why do you keep going back year after year?
Basically, the expo just builds your customer base. It doesn't matter whether you sell one lure or 500 lures, you are going to have following customers follow up, whether it's a week later, a month later, or 12 months later. So I personally go because it's building my customer base. Now, not only is that building the customer base for myself, but I'm showing my lures to customers that then go to their local tackle store, and then they're going to ask for them. It might be a store that already stocked my product, or then that store might reach out to me. So while people think, yeah, it's great because you make all this money, you make more money because you're not selling direct to the store. But for me, it's just about getting my products out there. And as you said before, I'm only young. We're in this for a long time. I want my stores to have my products for a long time to come. So they're my main priority moving forwards.
Right, so it's really a brand awareness thing. So getting your product out there, getting people to see it, getting potential retailers that might want to bulk buy from you at a wholesale price and put it in their stores. That's what it's all about.
100%. And it's one opportunity we get to actually stand behind our products and explain to people how to use them. I can show you on Facebook and tell you how I do it, but until you're actually there at a swim tank or showing someone how to do it, it's hard for them to understand. And usually that will result in a sale either there or, like I said, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later.
Yeah, or years later, as the case may
Exactly.
be. It's just you're constantly building that customer base. Mate, tell us about the other aspects of the Lure and Fly Expo. And I guess here I'm thinking about, I think back to my days of teaching people how to make lures, and I'd get people constantly saying, it's so great that you're doing this because there's so much secret squirrel stuff and people don't want to share their information. And then I get other people who'd say, "Why are you telling people that? Don't share that stuff. That's secret." Tell us about how the sort of the social and community aspect of it goes between lure makers. Is there lots of people helping people and lots of information sharing going on, or is it a little bit sort of closed shop?
Look, I think everyone's pretty open. Look, we're all like, I don't see another lure maker as a competitor. I just see him as a mate. Like, we're in it together. It's not like there's no need to like be argy bargy against each other. 9 times out of 10, he's selling a totally different lure or product to I am anyway. So I think it's hard to share exacts with each other because there's everyone's process is different. What I do isn't going to work for you. The quantities you do might not allow you to use the products I'm using, or they're not going to be compatible with your paint. So as far as like little nitty gritties, we probably don't share a heap of that stuff. But as far as like maybe styles of lures or stores to look at stocking, etc., stuff like that, it's all pretty open.
Yeah, oh, that's great, and that's really important, and it's great for the people who are coming to have a look at the lures. Who, like you say, you can either treat other lure makers as competitors, or you can treat them as mates. Now, at the end of the day, any angler who turns up at the Lure Expo is not going to buy one lure for their box. They're going to buy 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 or however many, and they're not going to buy all the same lure. They're going to get a variety of shapes, sizes, colours from different manufacturers. And I tell you what, you'll end up out in the water fishing next to somebody who's bought a lure at the expo who catches a fish when you don't, and you're going to say, "What lure are you using, mate?" "Oh, you're using one of those Jollops. I'm going to go and get some of those next week." So, it's all swings and roundabouts. There's plenty of room in the market for everybody, and so I love that everybody's helping everybody. That's a tremendous thing. So, let's this year, mate. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect on your stand. So, Gary said you've got something special lined up for us. He said that you've got probably one of the bigger displays this year as well. Tell us a bit about what's going on at the Jollip stand at the Lure and Fly Expo.
So basically, this year we're going to try and have models for everything. Basically, in the past it was sort of just had a small amount of stuff. This time we're going to have brim, bass, cod, barra, jacks, jewfish, you name it. It's going to be there. So it doesn't matter where you've travelled from. There's going to be a lure there to catch a species in your local waterway.
Oh, love it. Love it. Really, really cool stuff. All right. So, Gary, let's just switch back to you for a moment. I'd just like to have a bit of a chat about the awards that you have, the Lure of the Year awards. And there's a lot of different categories there. And I think we sort of touched on them a little bit earlier on. But, this is a really important thing for Australian lure makers as well, isn't it? Because it's recognition of, that innovation and the skill and the craftsmanship that goes into some of these lures. So tell us a little bit about the award ceremony and what that kind of does and how it works.
Yeah, well, we started that just as a bit of fun, really. I know my grandfather used to say it takes nothing to say thank you to somebody. And I thought, you know what, for a small investment of some awards, trophies, whatever, let's acknowledge some of the lure makers. And it was a bit loose initially. We've been trying to refine it over the years. Taking feedback on board. Um, and basically the first time was just about best bib diving lure because that was the most common creature that was at the expo. And what it actually did was, there's no sheep stations involved, but it's created an air of healthy competitiveness.
Yes.
And I think it's played a little bit of a part in a little bit of one-upmanship about, improving the finish on their lures and trying something a little bit different. I know a few years ago, I threw $500, $600 actually, out to a challenge, nothing to do with the expo, but I threw it out to Aussie lure makers and said, right, I don't think there's a jointed weight bait done by, it's so underdone in the Australian market. So you send me a lure if you want to enter this little competition. I own the lure now, but I'm going to give $600 to the winner and I'm going to go and test them. So what it did was got lure makers that have never tried a jointed weight bait or anything like that before. It got them having a crack at it.
I'll tell you what else it did, mate. It got me thinking because I'm just thinking now, Gary's just chucked $600 out there, and how many lures did he get in his box that nobody else has got?
I got 12 lures that are just primo, and it's the best $600 I ever spent.
Yeah, it would be. And how many of those do you fish, mate? And how many of them you got hanging on the wall?
Oh, a couple are hanging on the wall. A couple are just works of art. You know, they all swim and they all worked. Um, but made me feel really awkward about actually picking a winner then as well. You know, I loved them all, but you
Well,
know,
that
I tried to keep to the subject on what I was trying to achieve, and I was trying to like in between that bass size, barra size, cod size. You know, something that could cover a few bases there.
yeah, yep. And that
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
brings me to the next question I was going to ask you is how you go about judging, because I've been to the expo, I've seen the lures. How do you pick a winner out of
We did judging the first year, and I said I'm never doing that shit again. Honestly, excuse my language. I'm never been involved with that. That is so stressful.
Yeah, yeah,
So we switched over to a peer review.
yeah. Great.
So all the lure makers got to vote. I think initially we had a 3-2-1, and everyone's going to give themselves three.
Yeah.
Why not? And it's the twos and ones that'll sort out the sheep from the goats, you know. And that worked. But you know what? In the current format, where we're only running one day, lure makers can't get away from their stand to go and have a look at what everyone else has done, and became, I don't know, a couple of people said, look, it's a popularity contest. So now it's down to the public. So the public get to vote on all the lures. The lure makers submit them on the Friday when we're setting up, or early Saturday morning. They go in the cabinet, and the members of the public can come past, and they can have their input on what they think's a good lure. If we want to, like Dale that runs that component of the expo, he's the coordinator. He'll pull some out and go and swim in one of the test tanks, and we'll do that. So now it's grown. We've now got all these different categories, and then we decided some lure makers are just lures are absolute works of art, and they're going to win every time. But are they actually a fishing lure? So we've done a category like a dollar category. So in all the categories, they've got to be available for sale at the expo. So it's not just a one-off. And we've got all the categories are lures got to be for sale below $30 and over $30. And that gives an opportunity for the mass produced guys to make a new lure and win something as well. So yeah, and then this year we've also added soft plastics for the first time, and I don't even know the right terminology, like to revive that rattling spot jackal style.
Yeah, I know the ones. Yeah, I know the ones you mean. So
Lipless crankbait.
a lipless
Lipless
crankbait, a
crankbait,
hard bodied vibe. Yep,
yeah,
yep. Okay,
yeah.
so we
So
know the
we've
style
done
of
a
lure you
category
mean.
for those as well
Yeah, and
this year
under
too, and that's just about. Not many Australian lure makers are making them, and I know that. But going into it, but I said, look, you know what? I want that category because I want to encourage all our Aussie lure makers to fill that niche.
yeah, it's a gap that needs to be filled because it's a very
Yep.
very versatile style of lure. Yep.
Yeah.
So
So
Joey,
there's
sorry, keep going.
yeah, there's all these different categories now, and there's also a most artistic. So for those one-offs,
Yep.
you go for it.
There's one-off works of art that are collector's items
Yep.
that nobody wants to fish because they're worth too much.
Yep. So
Good.
Joey's won. What have you won in the past, Joey? Forgot. I don't remember off the top of my head.
It was at Lee. I think it must have been 19. We won best presented stand.
Yeah.
And we won the best top water lure under $30.
Right.
Okay.
And what did that do for your business, being part of that and winning that award?
On the Sunday, it definitely sold a hell of a lot more lures. But for me, it's just like I've just got them up on the shelf here, like it's something to remember. It's to be proud of, It's like, well, and at that point, that's when our peers were still voting. So it's like, hey, there's 40 other lure makers here that could have voted for themselves, and they've voted for me. So that was pretty humbling, to be honest.
Yeah, good stuff. And a feather in your cap. I mean, obviously, people are seeing what you're doing and appreciating it, and who better to appreciate it than fellow lure makers that understand
100%.
what's going into it, Gary, collections, lure collectors, this is something that I've never been personally involved in. You obviously are, but it's a really big aspect of the Lure and Fly Expo, isn't it? People come there for the collections. They come there to, get that missing lure that they don't have. So antique lures and that sort of thing, but also, contemporary lures that they might want to add to their collection. So they've got one of everything. Tell us a little bit about, sort of what the attraction is there with the lure collectors.
Well, initially it was just about let's celebrate those lure makers from days gone by, and acknowledge them. and look, I was collecting a few back in the day when we kicked off, but there were some other guys with just absolutely insane collections, and let's get them out there and show people what's gone through in the past and appreciate it. And then it kind of morphed into, well, I'd always get a lot of questions about, can you identify what this lure is or whatever? And there's some guys out there that know 10 times more than me. But, okay, why don't you bring them lures along? And all these guys with a lot of, another big knowledge bank on what they are, they'll just identify them for you. And you know what? They might offer you $20, $50, or $100 for it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it turned into a bit of a buy, swap, and sell, like a trader's table area as well. So, there's been deals done like in the tens of thousands of dollars, not just for one lure, but I've seen individual lures go for well over $1,000 several times. I saw one lure go for 3,000. One lure.
Yep.
One. It sold for $12.99 brand new.
Yeah. Yep.
That's you mentioned about, someone might be missing one color in a range, and that's the one color they want. So, to me, it might it might be a nice lure, but I'm not going to pay $100 for it. But someone else might pay $300
Yep.
because it's the one they want.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? The
So,
side of things.
There's old timers, or I saw one deceased estate. Some guy bought his old grandfather's old tackle box from a shed. He wasn't even into fishing, but he showed up and said, the family told me to bring this along, and he walked out with a fistful of cash. It was just some really desirable. The collectors just launched on them.
Yeah.
And so there you go, just shoved money in the hand, and the collections got better.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a good part of it. And it's not just about the new stuff; it's about the old stuff, and even there's people collecting currently available stuff. And I don't know if anyone's collecting Joey's lures yet, but that'll happen.
Yeah. And, well, let's ask him the question, because I know when I was making lures and teaching people to make lures, I'd get emails on a fairly regular basis from someone saying, I want to buy one of your lures, and I'd say, well, what are you fishing for? I don't want to fish with it. I'm a collector. Well, what sort of lure do you? I don't care. Any one of your lures will do. So I got a fair bit of that. Joey, do you find the same thing?
Yeah, I don't have collectors that'll just like buy my whole color range of a certain model. Like I know guys like Paul Della will just have guys rock up at the expo and just get one of everything and put it away for 20 years. I don't have that yet, but what I do have is when I get a little bit of spare time, I'll make some one-off pieces that I might film for YouTube or just make something to sell. And there's about 3 guys that are pretty hardcore collectors, and they'll pay some pretty serious money for them. So yeah, it's pretty humbling to think so early on that guys are already paying some big dollars for some cool lures.
But it's also, as a lure maker, that's the fun part, isn't it? I mean, when you've got a lure design that you've settled on and you're mass producing it, it's still pleasant, and it's how you make a living. But it's the design, part of what you do, and the making those one-off things. It's a bit more of a challenge, I guess. That's for me anyway. That was what sort of soothed the soul, and so to be able to get a few bucks for it's not a bad sort of a gig.
Yeah, and those one-off lures definitely refine your skills, because when you're making one of something, like that lure is 100% done with these things. So you refine so many skills, especially if you're carving gills or all those tricky little things. So yeah, it kind of brings you back down from doing your full-on thousands of something at a time just to do one thing. It kind of just relaxes you for a few days anyway.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Look, I think we might start to bring this interview to a close. But Gary, before we do that, maybe would you like to tell us where we need to go to find the expo, all the details, times, how can we get in touch with you, websites, all that sort of stuff? Give us a quick rundown, mate. We'll put all this in the show notes, of course, for those who don't remember it. But hit us with it.
So it's one day. That happened after last year. We had COVID, and it was just a snap throw together. So, and the feedback from majority of the exhibitors was one day work's an absolute treat.
Okay.
So one day, Saturday, 30th of July, back where it all started. We're in 2 buildings now, plus a whole stack of outdoor sites. There's over 80, so be about 90 exhibits all up.
Wow. Yep.
And 30th of July, Fernvale Showgrounds. If you can't find that, you can. It is on the website, lewisshow.com.au, and it's open from 9 till 3. If you want to camp, you can camp there. It's $10 a night at the showgrounds. There's good amenities, and little country town. If you've never been there, come there, get a pie. They're famous for them. While you're there, and make a weekend of it. And because we got Lake Waimano just up the road, but it's been flooded, the water's dirty, but we've got a great river just a couple of clicks away. It's a great weekend.
Go buy some lures, take them out, and take them for a spin.
Yeah, put that lawn on hold and just get a mortgage. Honestly, if you haven't been there and just any sort of fish show, just come along and it's going to blow your mind on the quality. There's going to be lures there from like $13, for 10, for molded lures up to, I don't know,
Don't put an upper limit on it, mate, because the sky's
I'm
the
not,
limit.
I'm not, but some of the best lure makers in the country, a whole stack of them are going to be there. Joey's up there with them now, and there's legends going to be there. Matty Fraser from Barambo. I mean, we open the gate and they run into guys like him.
Yep.
They're going to be running to Joey, Paul Nella, and there's a whole swag of them. Oh, something we didn't mention earlier. You mentioned about components for lures. There's going to be a whole stack of split rings, and there's trebles and bibs and all the bits and bobs that you want, except for the paint and the timber for the lures themselves.
Yep.
So there's going to be a whole stack of stuff there. I just wanted to mention one other thing.
Sure.
At the very, very first Lure Expo, there was some guy that showed up, and we had Tom Barrett from Gidgee Lures doing a demo on how to do some carving. And there was like 100 people sat down watching. There's one guy sitting there making notes. And he flew up from Melbourne, and he sat there and listened to everyone. He's going around talking to all the lure makers, making these notes. And he showed up. He rang me, and he showed up the following year. He said, "I want to come up and I want to have a stand." And he showed up with the worst 10 lures that I've ever seen. Like, they were horrendous. I bought a couple of them, and they wouldn't swim or anything. But you know what? He had a crack, and he's making pretty good lures these days.
Mm.
But those couple that I bought are some of my favourites in my collection that are hanging up. Because he had a crack, and he's gone through, and he's making lures as good as anyone else these days. To me, that epitomises what the Lure Expo was. Mission accomplished. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I absolutely get it. And look, I think back, to my early days. I started as a kid making lures, and I made some butt ugly lures that were absolutely horrendous. I was very, very fortunate that a suicidal rainbow trout ate one of my very early lures, and I was hooked. And that lure never deserved to catch a fish, but because it did, I kept making lures, and I got better and better at it. And that's that's the rest history. Joey, before we wrap up, mate, I know that your folks have got a tackle store. You work in the tackle store when you're not making lures. Give us a quick plug for the tackle shop, mate.
Yeah, mate, when I'm not here sitting in the freezing cold shed, I'm at Casino Outdoors. So we're in Casino on the northern rivers. We're sort of an hour from the coast, so we stock pretty well everything. You want to head out to Copeton on your way through, we've got your cod stuff covered. Passion of mine's jewfish, so we have a pretty good range of jew tackle in store, and we live on one of the best wild bass rivers in Australia, so we've got your bass tackle pretty well covered.
Pretty good range of Jollip lures in there as well, I'd imagine.
No, not really. Mum's always into me. She's got a big order in. She's like, "This is terrible. You've not even got them in your own shop." So
yeah, that's the way it works, though, isn't it? And Gary, you were holding up a lure there, mate.
Yeah. I was talking about some of the old Garra lures. I mean, that one's dating back to the 1970s. Have a look at that puppy.
Yeah, mate, you're going to need to. We are going to put the video for this up on YouTube, so. The audio will be on the regular ALF podcast, but the video will be on YouTube. And now that you've shown those lures, mate, you're going to need to up your insurance, and you're going to need to put them in a safe somewhere that's bolted to the floor.
I just love them. I mean, that's just gold. Fantastic. Close to the camera there, but there's some of the Terry Marshall's old ones. And they're the sort of things we like to show off. They're dating back to the 70s. Some of those, and they're just magnificent. I love them.
And they would
Even a
still
couple of
catch
old,
fish today too.
a couple of his old
Good
blanks he
wager.
never painted.
Yep.
Yeah, all put together. Yeah, we got a
Awesome
hell of a
stuff.
box full of them. Yeah,
Awesome
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No,
Yep.
love them, and that's it's about appreciating what's happened in the past. You can even see the evolution. If I grab some of Terry's newer stuff, as he's progressed through the years, and that's a lot of shared information.
Yep.
And he'll tell you himself and a lot of other little makers. They'll say that oh yeah, I've got a tip on this painting or this material, or but you go back to some of the old times, they were cutting up old caravans to you could see the crinkled bibs still. That's true. Old caravan on the side of the road had been dumped, and they were out there with the tin snips. To get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little story. I'm going to go off on a tangent again here, but I'll tell you a little story. I had Kay Bush on the podcast quite a while ago now, but it took me a very long time to convince Bushy to come on because, as you're probably aware, he's just decided he's going to do his own thing and be a quiet hermit fisherman, and that's fine. And I was absolutely thrilled when he did come on the show, but we got talking afterwards about lures, and I reckon for about 3 or 4 months afterwards, I get a text message or a phone call from Bushy once a week about lure making, and it was just fantastic to be able to talk to him about it. So that's how it goes. Yeah. What do you got there, mate?
That one. Can you see that? That's an old caravan.
Yeah.
Side.
Diving
Yeah.
lip made out of caravan. And,
Yeah. Bushy's forgotten more about fishing than I'll ever know. So.
Yep. An absolute legend. Yeah. And makes some great handmade lures as well.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, folks, I'm going to bring this to a close now. We could chat all night, and just quietly after I turn the recording off, we may stick around here and have a bit of a chat for a bit longer. So you guys are going to miss out, but the three of us are going to have a great chat. So as I said, we'll put some show notes together for. Oh, let me start again. We'll put some show notes together for this episode, which will be 534. Those show notes will be available over at doclures.com. We'll also put up, this is being recorded as a video as well as audio, so we'll put the video up on YouTube. I'll put a link on the Doc Lures show notes, and it'll go out on the social media as well, so keep an eye out for that. Gary Fitz, thank you so much for coming along. Thank you so much for all you've done for Australian lure makers through the Lure and Fly and Outdoors Expo, which, once again, everybody, 30th of July 2022, Saturday the 30th of July at the Fernvale Showgrounds, opening the gates at 9 a.m. Make sure you're there early because you're going to want to get around all 80 or 90 exhibits before the day's out. It's a one-day show. So, get in there, see some Aussie lures being made, talk to some Aussie lure makers, do some fly tying, learn some fly casting, do some camp cooking. I mean, the list goes on and on. Have a look at all the exhibits. It's going to be a great day. Make sure you're there. Joey, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your passion with us. It's always great to talk to an Aussie lure maker. I really appreciate what you've done. I wish you all the very best, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to come and look you up at your stand at the Expo, mate. And looking forward to seeing all of those lures for all those different species that you mentioned earlier on. That's going to be quite an exhibit to go and see. So thank you so much. And
thanks a lot, Greg. Always a pleasure, mate.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and look forward. I'm really sorry. I would love to have been at the Expo this year, but unfortunately I have other commitments that I just cannot get out of. So next year, mate, count me in. I'll be down there with bells on, and look forward to having a beer with you and talking to some other lure makers down there. But once again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the Expo, and we'll talk to you again this time next year, perhaps.
Thanks,
cheers, mate.